While Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been kept under wraps by Marvel Studios, it's a safe bet that the slate will include the Eternals. And since Marvel Studios is notorious for planting Easter eggs throughout their films, we took a look back to see if any hints were dropped about the Eternals' involvement. Funnily enough, there's a particular plot point in Iron Man 3 that could be a major hint at the Eternals' involvement in the MCU. Let's take a deep dive into this theory to see if it holds any water. Get it? Dive? Water? Man, we're good. First and foremost, we should probably address the fact that not many people know what the Eternals is. This is understandable, seeing as how this is one of the more obscure titles in the Marvel Universe. There's a lot you should know about these characters if we want this theory to make sense, so let's start things off by digging into their comic book roots. All of this Eternals madness started with Jack Kirby. If that name doesn't ring a bell, then we can't help you. Seriously, what kind of comic book fan are you if you don't know who Jack Kirby is? Why are we even talking to you right now? Go look him up on Google or Wikipedia, or whatever it is you kids are using for reference now. Or if you're just that lazy, you can hang out here while we interrupt our Eternals history lesson to give you ignorant plebeians a mini history lesson on Jack Kirby. That's right, a history lesson within a history lesson. It's pretty much Inception up in here. So Jack Kirby was one of the most prolific and pivotal artists and writers in comic bookdom. Once he'd started working in the industry, he and Joe Simon created Captain America, which was a major breakthrough for Timely Comics, Marvel Comics' predecessor. In addition to co-creating Captain America, Kirby worked with Stan Lee in the early days of Marvel, creating a huge number of superheroes you might have heard of. Fantastic Four, X-Men, Black Panther, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. His work paved the way for so many influential talents in the industry. But Kirby's loyalties weren't solely reserved for Marvel. He created many characters for DC Comics as well. Is that sacrilegious to just jump ship from Marvel to DC and vice versa? Yeah, probably. But he's Jack Kirby. He can do whatever he dang well pleases. Let's accept it and just push forward. During his time at DC, Kirby worked on the New Gods saga, a series of titles dealing with all kinds of incredible mythological subject matter. Despite Kirby's original plans, including a definitive series ending, DC ended up canceling the titles before they got a proper send-off. While this may have been bad news at the time, it resulted in Kirby's being brought back into the Marvel fold, and the creation of the Eternals. The Eternals took a number of elements from Kirby's New Gods series. It's as if Kirby was determined to prove once and for all that the concept worked. Basically, the Eternals are super powerful cosmic entities created by the Celestials, the oldest beings in the Marvel Universe. But don't be fooled by the Eternals' resemblance to us puny mortals. They possess incredible strength and powers unlike anything seen on Earth. Well, I guess unless you count every single superhero living there, but I digress. The Eternals are incredibly resilient to damage, sporting healing factors that would make Wolverine and Deadpool oh so envious. They can fly, they can read minds, and they have incredible strength too. Not bad, right? Many of the Eternals end up honing their focus on one particular ability over another, such as speed or mind manipulation. And get this, they even have their own Megazord. Yeah, that's right. When things get real dicey, the Eternals merge into a powerful being called the Unimind, which exhibits the powers of whichever Eternals members have bonded together. Here's the thing though, the Unimind doesn't look nearly as cool as a Megazord. It's basically just a giant yellow brain. And maybe giant yellow brains are your thing, but we kind of prefer giant robots with giant swords that take on giant monsters. Just us? Alright, moving on. The reason the Celestials created the Eternals is so that the Eternals could defend Earth from any outside forces that threatened it. But then the Celestials had to go and be total jerks by creating the Deviants as well. The Deviants are basically the polar opposites of the Eternals. They're evil, they love waging war, and they're oh so ugly. Monstrous in both appearance and nature. I mean, come on, they're even called Deviants. You'd think the Celestials would have been a little less on the nose with naming these guys. The Eternals and the Deviants have been at each other's cosmic throats since the dawn of time. We're guessing it has something to do with the Deviants being jealous that the Eternals are so much better looking than they are. Often, their wars are waged with the fate of the planet hanging in the balance. No big deal. And here's another little bit of Eternals trivia for you. A certain purple baddie with impeccable finger-snapping skills is a third-generation Eternal. Yeah, that's right, we're talking about Thanos himself. Though, to be fair, he actually possessed the Deviant gene, which is why he looks all purple and weird and stuff. We love you, Thanos, but you gotta do something about that chin. But you wanna know something really sad? The Eternals comic book series ended up getting canceled as well. And one of the worst parts about this was that, just like with New Gods, there were a number of unresolved storylines left hanging in the wake of this cancellation. What a bummer. But the good news is that this wasn't the last time comic book fans would hear about them. them. Comic book writers Roy Thomas and Mark Grunwald found a way to incorporate the Eternals in the Thor story arc they'd been working on. Because of their inclusion, many of those dangling plot lines were able to be tied up all nice and neatly. And that wasn't the last of it either. The Eternals were constantly referenced in the Marvel Universe, particularly when it came to the Celestials' experiments on humanity and why certain humans developed superpowers. In addition to this, Marvel released a couple different miniseries throughout the next 2 or so decades. In 1985, Peter B. Gillis and Sal Buscema helmed a 12-issue miniseries revival, and in 2006, acclaimed author Neil Gaiman and artist John Romita Jr. gave it a stab. The latter miniseries helped bring the Eternals into the modern age of Marvel, updating both the lore and the characters. Now, let's flash forward a few years to 2010 and the release of Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3 was a huge deal for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not only did it serve as a trilogy capper for the hero that kicked off the whole MCU, it was the first entry following Joss Whedon's massively successful Avengers film. Iron Man 3 threw Marvel fans for a loop with its subversive take on the superhero genre. Writer-director Shane Black honed in on Tony Stark as a person, crafting a more personal journey for the character. Black also put an emphasis on comedy.
Honestly, I hate working here. They are so weird.
Much to the annoyance of many Marvel fans who still haven't forgiven the film for that Mandarin twist.
I am the Mandarin!
But we've already done a video about how Iron Man 3 changed the trajectory of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which you should totally check out if you haven't already, so we won't go into all the nitty-gritty plot details. When it comes to how Iron Man 3 hints at the potential involvement of the Eternals, we really want to hone in on one particular plot point, Extremis. In Iron Man 3, Extremis is basically an advanced form of genetic mutation pioneered by the movie's baddie Aldrich Killian and his partner Maya Hansen. Extremis rewrote and reformed an individual's DNA in order to unlock their previously unharnessed potential. It ended up triggering some pretty insane abilities, including actual fire breathing. No joke. Other less ridiculous abilities include resistance to injury, healing factors, super strength, and speed. Is all this beginning to sound familiar? These are all the exact abilities exhibited by the Eternals. When elaborating on how and why Extremis worked, Killian explained that it utilized an unused portion of human DNA. An empty slot is how he described it. He continues by saying, "And what this tells us is that our mind, our entire DNA in fact, is destined to be upgraded." This plot point hasn't really been exploited in the Marvel Cinematic Universe since its introduction, but it did show up in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. television show. In the series, Hydra ends up using Extremis as a starting point for developing their own super soldier serum. The implication here is that many of our favorite heroes in the MCU developed superpowers as a direct result of this empty gap in their DNA being triggered, and used it to its fullest potential. As established in the Eternals comic book series, this is something the Celestials had always intended, but humanity had started to take point and do all the groundwork to speed up the evolutionary process. When the Celestials visited Earth roughly 4 billion years ago, they created the Eternals and the Deviants. This universe-altering event ended up affecting humanity in some surprising ways. Basically, the Celestials' devious meddling, seriously, they should have just called the Celestials Deviants, this strange, mysterious gap in humanity's DNA was created. This gap opened up a whole world of potential for the human race, presenting the possibility of normal humans taking on superpowered abilities. Peter Parker's radioactive spider bite, Steve Rogers' super serum, the gamma radiation that transformed puny Bruce Banner into an incredible Hulk. All of this was possible because of this gap in human DNA. And what about those mutants? They're the ones who ended up taking the next step in human evolution, triggering that X gene portion of their DNA that had laid dormant. Though there isn't an explicit synopsis for Marvel Studios' Eternals movie, there have been hints that the film will take place millions of years before humanity. Will it end up being the Skyward Sword of the MCU, showcasing the backstory to everything that brought about the Marvel Universe in the first place? And if they do introduce the storyline involving the Celestials tampering with humanity's DNA, will this then end up foreshadowing Killian's discovery millions of years later? And what about the Skrulls? Huh? You realize they're an entire race of deviants too. There's a lot of teasing going on here. It can't just be a coincidence. So this is the fun part where we get to break everything down and connect those dots. You ready? Let's get started. All of Killian's experiments and discoveries about the empty gap in humanity's DNA may be the key to understanding what made the Eternals and the Deviants as powerful as they are. Remember, they didn't use any fancy schmancy super soldier serum or radioactive spiders to get to the level they're at. They were able to develop and hone their abilities in a more natural, organic way. The whole point we're trying to make here is that Killian stumbled on a significant finding that, while it hasn't played a major role in the MCU yet, may end up being far more important than we originally thought. It's completely possible that Kevin Feige and his merry band of storytellers have considered this particular plot point in Iron Man 3 as an entry point point for the Eternals to make their grand entrance. As they've proven time and time again, while they love to plot and plan out their universe, they've also allowed for enough flexibility to add things at random and justify certain decisions that might not have made sense earlier on. So is there any validity to this story? That's a more difficult question to answer. While we've already addressed Marvel Studios' love for Easter eggs and teasing fans with hints of what's to come, it's far less likely that they intended Killian's plan to foreshadow the Eternals' eventual involvement in the MCU. That being said, we wouldn't be surprised if Marvel decided to use this specific Iron Man 3 storyline as an example later down the line. Crazy? Maybe. But come on, people. Whoever said fan theories were sane? And at the very least, we imagine Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige has nothing better to do than kick back with a cup of joe and watch all of our theory videos. He's probably watching this one now, thinking, I haven't considered that before, but now that I have to do it. Thanks, ScreenRant. Come on, we subscribe to our channel. Are we on to something, true believers? Do you think Killian's discoveries in Iron Man 3 will play a part in the larger MCU? Specifically, the Eternals film. Do you think this theory is a bit too much of a stretch, even for us? Let us know in the comments below. And hey, be cool like Kevin Feige and subscribe to our channel. Even if he's not really subscribed, we can always dream, can't we?